Hi, I'm Darren and welcome to Level Up EE Lab. In today's episode, I'll be beginning the repairs and restorations on this Hallicrafters SX-140 Amateur radio receiver. I'll do a thorough assessment of its present condition, including discovering a nasty mess inside the case. Show the techniques I used to remove decades of accumulated grime, and finish with a detailed plan of next steps to return it to full function. If you've been keeping up with my channel, you will have seen by now the videos I've done on the HT40. That's the matching transmitter that goes with this SX-140, and Hallicrafters marketed them together in the early 1960s as a pair for the novice class amateur radio enthusiast. Now, I also mentioned in the most recent video that I did, I was going to a Hamfest to try and find a replacement microphone for that HT40. And as Hamfests go, you sometimes find things you didn't expect and don't find things that you're looking for. So I wasn't able to find a microphone, but I was able to find this SX-140. Here's the SX-140 on my giant cake turntable so we can get a good look at it. You can see that the front panel is in pretty decent shape. All the control knobs are present, and so are all the vacuum tubes. Even the tube diagram label inside the case is still intact, and the serial number label is still legible. But unfortunately, the case does have a big dent in it and several rusted spots. So this radio clearly hasn't been gingerly cared for all of its life. Now, I did try to get some history from the seller when I bought this, and when you go to a Hamfest and you're looking at old amateur radio gear, it's fun to ask the person selling it if there's any stories about the unit from years past. You know, maybe it was something that they put together when they were in college, and maybe they worked their first all-state award on it or something like that. It's just, you know, fun to ask and see if there's any history behind something that you're going to buy. But unfortunately, in this case, there wasn't anything the seller could tell me other than he was working to help someone sell off an estate, which sadly is just becoming more and more common as hams like me just get older and older. And this unit did sit in storage for quite a while, and that's, you know, it's evident by its condition that it hadn't been used in many, many years. Next, I looked more closely at the controls, and most of them do rotate fine when I gently twist them. And I do mean gentle. It's never a good idea to honk down on these old controls. It's too easy to break an unobtainium switch. Case in point, the main tuning feels like it's binding, so I'm leaving it alone for now. And both the cal reset and antenna trim knobs feel stiff as well. The meter needle looks like it might be frozen at full scale, so that's a possible issue. My biggest concern is this gunk right here. It's not rust, I'm not sure what it is. Worst case, it could be potting from a fried power transformer or exploded capacitor electrolyte. Either way, it's a bit alarming. Here's a closer look at that dent in the case. Hammering it back out should be doable. And look at this vintage dust accumulation. It's more like fur is growing on the chassis than dirt. It doesn't want to come off easily. Alright, so that's the preview of the condition of the receiver. So I have not opened this up yet, and like I said in the preview, I'm a little worried about that gunk at the bottom of what I'm going to find. So that'll be the next step here, is pulling the chassis out of the case and see what's lurking in there, and hopefully I'm not in for a bad surprise. Okay, moment of truth time. Time to get the chassis out of this case, and it sure looks like somebody's been in here before. There's only 3 of the 4 screws present, so that's always a sign that somebody's had this open in the past, and not surprisingly, old radios. At some point somebody's going to feel the need to get inside there, so let's get these screws out. And normally I don't show this level of detail. I find it kind of boring, quite frankly, when someone's just turning a screwdriver and removing screws, but in this case this is kind of special. I wanted to do this on live video, so let's see what we got here. Turn it around and see if it'll come out gently, and it is stuck a little bit. There we go. Slide it out. Ooh. That doesn't look good. Wow. That, what is that? That almost looks like it's maybe Coke or something that got spilled in there. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, there's some rust over on the other side, but that's not really rust there. That looks like it's something that got spilled in there, so that's encouraging. Maybe it's not something blown on the chassis. So, all right, let's put this back on camera and flip it over and see what we got here. Hold your breath. Hey, that's not too bad. That's actually pretty good. I see some cobwebs. Let me get something to clean those off. But cobwebs are no big deal. Doesn't look like any of the capacitors are blown, and the coils all look intact. Nothing's melted there. There's no goop from the transformer that's oozed down in here. So I'm actually kind of surprised. Not too bad. I mean, these caps are going to have to get replaced, but all in all, this is good. This is a really good sign that this thing can be restored. Okay, so fast forward a couple of hours, and I've had a chance to look at the chassis in more detail, and I've made a short list of things that I will definitely have to address. So fortunately, the list does look pretty short. The problems that I've seen are not severe. They're pretty common for an older radio like this. So first one, not surprisingly, one of the capacitors is bad. It's actually oozing electrolyte out of the vent hole on the end. And that's something, like I say, you see that on these older capacitors. They're prone to do that. And I definitely take the no mercy approach, as I've said in my other videos on older electronic gear. Something this old and with capacitors over 50 years old, there is no reason whatsoever to save any of these electrolytic or these film capacitors. There's a total of 10 of them. They're all going to get replaced. The other thing I saw is there's a burnt resistor over here. It's R45. It's a 10 ohm half watt resistor, and it's on the AC side of the secondary side of the transformer in the AC loop before it gets to the diodes. And that's a little odd because normally if there's a resistor there to control voltage, it's at least a 1 watt resistor. So I will replace it for sure because it does look burnt, and it is out of spec at 17 ohms instead of 10 ohms. So I will replace that with a 1 watt resistor to get a little more heat dissipation. And then right next to them, these two diodes, these have clearly been replaced. You can tell because whoever did the service did not take the time to unsolder the joint at the terminal strip. Just cut the lead on the existing diode and sort of a flying lead connection in midair connected the new diodes in place. So not the best practice, so I will replace those as well. Now I do have to do a cleaning on this, and I'll show here in a moment in the same video the steps that I do to clean the chassis. It works very well to get the old grime and especially any nicotine that might have accumulated from a smoker. You'd be surprised how nasty that gets on these radios, and it's fairly easy to clean off. And then after it's dried, I'll do a more thorough check and go through each resistor. I'll walk the schematic from the antenna all the way to the speaker to make sure that everything's wired correctly, because this unit was available as a kit, and anytime you're dealing with a radio that was a kit, you don't really trust that the prior person wired everything correctly, and occasionally you will find errors or oversight, so I do want to check that. And the last comment I would make is I did check the vacuum tubes. I pulled those out, and I have a Sencor TC162 tube tester that I used. And if you're not familiar with tube testers, they really fall into two camps. The basic tester, which is what the Sencor is, and then a more advanced tester that can actually test transconductance. Now, either way, with either style of tube tester, if you fail a parameter on the tube tester, you can pretty much assume that your tube is bad. However, the counter argument is not true. If you pass all of this test, that doesn't guarantee you that your tube is good. So that's just one of the little gotchas with old vacuum tubes. The final referee is the circuit that you put it in. Now, I don't have a clip here that shows more detail of the Sencor tester. However, if you're interested in it, please check out Alan's channel. He's Amateur callsign W2AEW. He did a nice detailed walkthrough of that Sencor tester a couple of years ago, and you can see in detail how it works. So next up, like I say, is going to be cleaning, so that'll be next. All right, time to take this party outside because it's going to get messy and nasty. So for supplies, it's pretty simple. Just need a 5-gallon bucket to put the radio on, and I use Super Clean. That's a cleaner you can get at Walmart and other places, and I do dilute it to 50% strength. I also use a spray bottle of water, and then of course a toothbrush to help get some of that stuck on stuff off. Now of course you want to wear gloves. Super Clean is a highly alkaline cleaner, meaning it's a strong base and will do bad things to your skin. Strong bases are nice for this because they break down fats and oils, and that's what's on these old radios, especially from cigarette smoke and nicotine and other nasty residues. And of course high voltage attracts that stuff, so you can see right away that toothbrush is doing a nice job taking that right off. Now that stuff wouldn't even budge. Remember when I had the first assessment, I rubbed it several times with my finger and could not get it off. And look at it, just coming right off, and all that lint balling up in it too. Now this method comes from a tip from the California Historical Radio Society, and a couple of other cautions. This is a strong cleaner. You don't want to leave it on for more than a couple of minutes, and don't apply it to bezels or first surface graphics. And note, I also removed the meter and I put some blue tape over things like the IF transformer cases and other spots to keep from getting excessive water inside of them. But it does a very nice job. You can just see that stuff running right off, and of course I'm scooping off the clumps of lint that happen to be on there. And this is one of the nastiest ones I've ever done in terms of just the amount of gunk that's on there. Now, there are some folks that will use a dishwasher method. I think that's absurd, quite frankly, because it's just going to be too much pressure and time in there, and not to mention the alkaline does not react well with aluminum. And that's why you want to keep the time for doing this fairly short, because if you've ever put any aluminum articles or utensils in a dishwasher, you know that they will get corroded over time from the dishwasher detergent. So here, just using clean water, spray it on there, and you can see how much better that looks. It's orders of magnitude better than it was before. Don't need high pressure, just a little spray bottle is all you need, and rinse it off a few more times any place that it's still accumulating, and it does the trick. And you can start to see down at the bottom, look at that nasty ooze that's come off of there. That's another reason why I do this outside at the edge of the patio. I can just tip the bucket over and knock that into the lawn. Okay, for the rest of the cleaning I am going to speed it up just because it's more of the same. So this is my hats off to Hand Tool Rescue and the technique that he usually uses. But on this front panel here, that was actually sandwiched between the actual graphics panel and this surface here on the chassis, and whatever got spilled in there just wicked up in there and stuck those two together. So I had to pry them apart carefully. And no, what you're hearing in the background is I'm not being strafed. I just live close to a private aviation airport, and speeding this audio up makes it sound like I might be under attack. And of course I clean the underside too, but there's no need to use a toothbrush here because just a simple spray, let it soak for 30 seconds to a minute or whatever, and just rinse it off works fine. Now I'm not concerned about washing out the lube and the potentiometers and the switches. I am going to relubricate those anyway, so that's not a concern. And then more blue tape. I do cover up any of the apertures into the tuning coils like I did on the top surface, just to avoid getting direct spray in there. Of course, there's apertures for the transformer as well. And yeah, more gunk came off. And then the final step is just put it out in the sun for the rest of the afternoon. That'll help dry things out real quick. So I intentionally did this work on a sunny, warm day. It's about 78 degrees and low humidity, so this will dry out in no time. Okay, I finished the cleaning process of this radio repair and restoration, and the chassis turned out very nice. As you can see here, it has all that old gunk and lint and cigarette residue, I'm assuming is what it was, from cigarette smoke, nicotine, etc. That's all gone now. It's as clean as it possibly can be for a radio that's over 50 years old. I have let it dry for a couple days, and then I did my checkout on the circuit against the schematic. I didn't find anything that was alarming. I did find that both the selectivity potentiometer and the audio gain potentiometer are no good, and the type of failure that they have is unfortunately common with some of these less expensive potentiometers. There's intermittent between the terminals and the trace on the pot itself. So it goes from contact to intermittent, and it's not something that can be repaired or cleaned. It's an actual mechanical failure. That's what I suspect has happened here, so I'm just going to have to buy new ones for those two functions. No big deal, certainly considering anything else that could be wrong with the radio. That's an easy thing to take care of. Moving around the circle, what I'll do, I'll interlay a few close-up videos as I talk about some of the other things that I've done. So let's move on to the meter. So one thing that's always a concern with these old radios is the meter. Now, they can fail mechanically or they can fail electrically. Mechanical can mean that there's a broken wire or that the bearings are stuck and it just can't respond anymore to electrical input, or electrically, it could just be so messed up with the internal resistance that you just don't get a good response signal. What I do is take a variable voltage power supply, a series of resistor, and an ammeter, and very carefully start applying microamps of current to the meter. And as I'll show in this inset video, I start increasing the voltage and dropping that series resistor or both until I slowly get up to the full scale reading of the meter and verify that yes, it can reach full scale. Now this meter, like a lot of meters, the full scale is 5 milliamps, so no surprises there. And it did track linearly nicely. As I dropped the current, say by half, the meter position went to half position and so on. So we're in good shape with the meter, no issues there. Second item, I found the source of why the main tuning knob was binding and why it was sluggish. There was a lot of tarnish, a lot of galling effectively taking place between the shaft and the bushing there. Again, not uncommon for something this old, and also easy to fix, or at least get it so it works well enough for the next few decades. So that's repaired now, and that turns smoothly. Next, moving on to the knobs. Now these have the nice Hallicrafters insert that has a stainless steel type polished finish to it. So just using a little bit of tarnish remover, and I have one knob here that I'm showing that doesn't have the tarnish remover applied, and gently kind of abrade that tarnish off, and the rest do. So they do look much better. Unfortunately, these two knobs here appear to be just die cast zinc more than likely. These are the antenna trim and cal reset knobs, and they just look kind of blah, but not going to get bent out of shape over that for now. I'm not trying to make this into any sort of cosmetic shelf queen. So moving on, the pointer and its associated dial cord look usable for now. I do have a replacement dial cord I'll use if I have to, but I'll just restring it, and hopefully some of the set that's in it will come out and it'll be just fine. And then lastly, the main panel. You have to be very careful with these old radios. Some of the graphics are not ink set. They're more like a powder kind of paint that's on there, and that could wipe off real easily. It's not the case with this Hallicrafters. It did clean up easily with some very light detergent, and I also removed the graduation dial, or the index, I guess, wherever you want to call it, the thing that shows all the frequencies. And proper name's escaping me, but whatever. Took that off and very carefully cleaned that as well. And then lastly, I did put a coat of automotive wax on the panel just to try to give it a little more nicer appearance and a little protection. So that's it. All the cleaning is done, and now the next step is to decide what I'm going to do with the radio itself. Oh, and I forgot to talk about the case. Now, here's what it looks like after it was cleaned up, and all that gunk and residue is gone. If you remember, there was this big blob of it right here, and I'm almost 100% convinced at this point that that was a cola that got spilled in there many, many years ago. And unfortunately, there is always a little acidicness to cola, and I think that's now damaged the case in that area, removed the paint, and it's a little rusted. But I managed to get it out and kept the tube diagram label intact. And even on the top of the case, where there was a large stain, I guess you could say, that was the same thing, and it came right off. I do have this dent that I'm going to have to deal with, but as I said earlier, I think I can gently hammer that back out and get it straight. I just need to decide what to do now, if anything, as far as the overall condition of this case, because one of my decision points is, do I want to try to color match this with the HT40 transmitter? That one definitely needs to be repainted, and if I'm going to paint one, it would obviously be very smart to paint them both so that they have a color match between the two of them. So we'll see if that's going to be in scope. All things considered, I'd have to say I'm pretty happy with the condition of this radio. Definitely had some fear when I brought it home from the Hamfest that I might be in for a real repair, or even worse, end up with something that just wasn't going to be economically salvageable. So what's up next? So as I mentioned in the repair series on the HT40, it's very important to define a scope of work in these projects. You certainly shouldn't go into it blind and not have any idea what your limits are and what your end goals are. So that said, here's what I'm planning for this SX-140. First and foremost is to replace the defective components. So for sure, the defective capacitors, the few resistors I found that were bad, and the couple of potentiometers. So want to get those repairs done. And then next, of course, is to perform an alignment per the manual. Check out its performance and make sure it's working the way the original manual specs said that it should. And then try it on the air versus some of my other receivers. Just see what the performance is like. Now, I will say, based upon what I found online, I'm not that encouraged that I'm going to find that this is a stellar receiver. Much like the HT40, it doesn't rank very high in terms of desirability for collectors that really get into the Hallicrafters gear. But nonetheless, we'll see how it performs. So I won't set my expectations too high. Now, what I also need to consider is what to do about the cosmetic issues. Now, I did mention the HT40 needs repainting, but I am going to defer any decision on the cosmetics until I see how well this works. Certainly don't want to spend a lot of time and energy getting it to look beautiful if it just isn't going to perform well. And then lastly, I'm not planning any modifications to it for now. Looking online briefly, I didn't see where there was a lot of material available on this receiver, so it will be a bigger effort to try to put together some sort of modification plan. So I'll just see how it works first and then make a decision. So that's all for this first episode on the SX-140. I got my repair sheet, of course, my old school notes that I made, along with the parts list of stuff I need to go order. That's going to take a few weeks to get those parts in, and of course take me a little while to get the repairs done and start doing the alignment and see how that works out, and that'll be the subject for the next video. So until then, bye for now.